Hi, Sparkles. This is episode 161 of the Intuitive Wisdom Podcast. Today, I am sharing my conversation with writer, spiritual teacher, and founder of the Aset Yoga Center, Regan Caruthers. We talk about the importance of being disciplined about your spirituality, heart-centered meditation is where the magic happens, the cornerstones of spiritual practice, and dowsing, or working with a pendulum. Here we go. Hi, and welcome to Intuitive Wisdom. I am your host, Kay Margaret Solorio. I am an author, spiritual teacher, and certified Angel Reiki Master. I believe that all the answers you seek are inside you. When you learn to discern between the ego and the intuition, tune into spirit, you can hear that whisper, your intuitive wisdom, answering your questions and showing you the next right step. On this podcast, we explore that connection and the good that happens in the world when you learn to hear your intuition, trust your intuitive wisdom, and allow your magic. Quick announcements before we get to the amazing interview. My book is available on Amazon. It is available in paperback and Kindle, and I've also made bonuses, which are available on my website, deliciousease.com. Once you order your book, you can type in your name and your email address, get access to those bonuses. I've outlined each chapter and given extra content. There are meditations. There are lots of goodies for each chapter of the book. The Center and Soul podcast series started on May 1st. If you haven't already, be sure to go to deliciousease.com/center to sign up for daily emails with journal prompts for each inspirational mini episode. We're working through meditation as a topic. And the monthly group sessions for this month are available this week. If you're listening when this releases, we are having our group Angel Energy Healing. For the month, the community, we're focusing on healing the mother wound, feelings of self-worth, and connecting to the Divine Mother. And next week, we have our free meditation mastermind. You're welcome to join. Be sure to sign up and save your spot. Again, you can register for both of those at deliciousease.com/services. And I'm working on a couple of new things for you to release in June, so be sure to stay tuned and I'll see you on the inside. Now to the interview. Regan Caruthers is a writer, spiritual teacher, and founder of the Aset Yoga Center, exploring themes of inner transformation, healing, and how to embody the energy of divine love. Her recently published memoir, Tragic Magic, is a testament to the power of unconditional love, forgiveness, and the discipline required to live life from an unconditionally loving heart. Beginning at age 3, Regan attended a school where meditation, Tai Chi, and singing devotional songs were daily practices. There she learned that consciousness, inner awareness, namely the story you tell yourself, while consciously connecting to the felt sense of unconditional love, is key to creating a fulfilling life. Yet she would reject these teachings as a response to profound trauma, closing herself off from her clairvoyance and her access to multiple dimensions to seek perceived safety in conventional norms and corporate success. A dramatic awakening at age 27 changed her path and brought her back to the wisdom teachings of her youth, igniting her lifelong pursuit for deeper truth and sustained awakening of her divine nature. Her work reminds us that transformation isn't passive. It requires both inner revelation and disciplined action. She hopes that her writing, teaching, and podcast appearances inspire others to reclaim and remember the truth of who they are, an eternal divine being whose purpose on earth is to learn how to consciously embody divine love. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Regan. Well, welcome again, Regan. Thank you for joining me. You may know on this podcast, I like to explore the magic that happens when you learn to hear and trust your own intuitive wisdom. So I was curious for you, what does it mean to hear your intuitive wisdom?
Gosh, I've done it for such a long time. What I will say is that the voice of intuitive guidance, what I really think of as divine guidance, right? A connection to a wisdom beyond your egoic self. That voice has a certain sound quality to it, which, wouldn't be necessarily relevant to your listeners because they have their own unique sound, right? And the sense too that, over all these years, I've just learned discretion, right? Because we talk to ourselves all the time. It's not as if there aren't plenty of voices inside of us. But I just know, the sound and the felt sense of an intuitive point of view.
I love that. And I enjoy asking that question because, like you said, everyone has a different experience. And sometimes I think when we are not as familiar with it, it's fun to recognize that it comes across differently. For me, it is kind of a whisper. I do hear it, but I know some people have said it's just a knowingness or a feeling and less of the hearing. So there are those subtle differences. Well,
yeah, and I think you just have to experiment.
Yes,
you'll learn by following whether or not that was good advice or not. Right?
That's a good point.
And in so doing, you begin to refine what to listen to within your own heart.
Yes. Yeah. I often get little clues. For some reason, I take notice on the little things that don't matter as much, but like I'll be in the grocery store and I'll get a little whisper like, oh, you should grab some of that too. And I'll go, why do I need that? That's not on the list. Focus. And then 2 days later, we're out of whatever it is. Oh, thank you. Missed that one.
Yeah. And I mean, it's comforting knowing that we all have access to unseen support.
Amen. Yes. Never actually alone. You can always tune in and connect.
Yes.
I love that. And obviously I love the inner work, mindset, and energy. And I often talk about it in context of opening up to that possibility of abundance, to calm and to ease. And I was curious, in your work and experience, when you see someone who wants to make a change in their life and then they recognize that it is the inner work, it starts with themselves. What do you see as characteristics or practices that help instill lasting change?
Well, you have to be disciplined. None of this works in the absence of that. Okay. And that's not a popular message necessarily. And a lot of spiritual teachers don't emphasize it. And I think they do, the public a disservice. So I think discipline is an integral part of healing, right? And staying awake. And I think an integral part of that healing process is to begin to bring radical honesty to what you have experienced and understand, really through lenses of different developmental stages, who's in there and what is their point of view, right? Because when we have trauma, and we all do, right? None of us gets out alive without it. That person, right, at that moment in time that the trauma happened, a belief, right, either about yourself or the larger world gets imprinted. And that traumatized part of you finds ways of coping, some of which are healthy and, many times isn't, right? And so for me, what I help my clients understand is who's in there, and then provide them the practice of holding loving witness to that part of themselves. Because when we fully can feel love, right? And I don't mean love, though I'm talking more about divine love, right? Knowing how to access it and then to bring it in. Because that's really its purpose, right? Is to provide this kind of energetic salve to all the places within your self that need it. So yeah, that's kind of a long answer. But.
Oh no, I love that. And I really appreciate the phrase bearing witness with love. Because in meditation, I feel like a lot of times we talk about observing your thoughts, but also that you get to then embody that divine love when you look back and acknowledge and appreciate those different parts.
Yeah, definitely. And for me, I don't know, maybe it was informed by my time as staff at Heart Math, or maybe, the things I learned when I was little at that magical school. But I find heart-centered meditation where I am consciously activating and connecting to the energy of love and holding that, right? Embodying that. That to me is where the magic happens. And it also, I think has refined my intuition.
How would you say it's refined your intuition?
I think the more time you spend in the heart, the more is revealed. I believe the seed of the spirit, the part of you that lives on, right, that doesn't die, is housed in the heart. And so the more you have time heading in there, right, the wisdom of your spirit, think of the heart kind of as a conduit, like a telephone line, with, I don't know if you did that with as a kid with cans and a string, but to me, the heart is where the communication happens.
I love that. When I started meditating, I would say good morning to spirit and pretend think about it in my mind as like going to have tea with God or with spirit, but same kind of idea, telephone, like, okay, let's meet.
Yeah, let's hang out.
Let's hang out. That's a better way of saying it. You had mentioned a little about like some of the conditioning we go through, and I was curious if you see any keys to making your happiness unconditional, to getting to embody that love and that heart space more easily, I guess.
Well, it takes practice, right? But once you connect to the felt sense of your transcendent self, right? Not your egoic self, the self that witnesses the mind, right? The self that witnesses the body. Again, I think that's the key.
I love that. And it gives us I feel like there's so much relief in that sentence too, when you can separate the two. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And know, the point of view difference between the ego and the divinity that you are, because you're both, right? I mean, the ego's not bad. Ego's just part of it, and you have to learn what's what. And I have found, the less I attend to the egoic self and the more I attend to the divinity self, right? The divine self, there's just so much more peace in that.
Amen. Yeah, you reminded me of when I was younger, I used to say like refer to my body separately, like say, oh, my stomach is hungry, not say I'm hungry. And now that makes sense. Oh, there, of course, because there is a difference between the physical and the non-physical, but I didn't know better then. I feel like some of what you said also goes with my next question. I had read on your website a quote: "It's having dominion over yourself and how you respond to life is critical in creating a fulfilling, non-reactive way of living. Reaction versus response." I was hoping you could speak more to that.
Well, we don't necessarily understand the sovereignty that we can have. And, part of this was informed by my early education. It was kind of infused in the pedagogy, this idea that, between any sensory input that's coming at you and what you choose to do with it, there's time and space. And again, a spiritual practice helps to kind of create that spaciousness. But, as the founder of my grade school said repeatedly, every thought and feeling you have is your choice. We don't think that we have choice.
No.
Right? We have language that says, oh, that makes me mad, as if you had nothing to do with it. Right?
I never thought of it as the language structure. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it comes from that. And, it's easier to assign blame somewhere else, right? To not take full responsibility for yourself, right? That responsibility of self, which also has to do with how you respond to things. And it's not to say that anger is is bad. But boy, before you go through the biochemical consequence of that emotion and the cognitive consequence and everything else, I don't know, try to ensure that you're truly choosing it, that it isn't just some sort of automatic reaction. And like I tell my clients, when we have an emotional reaction, particularly one that we would characterize as not positive, right? It's a call from our unhealed self. Because someone else could be experiencing the exact same thing and have a completely different reaction and point of view. Mm-hmm. So just knowing the truth of that, right? We can all acknowledge that that's true. Well, then that means there's nothing inherent in the thing that's happening. It's about what's within you that is, reacting. So I often say, think of it this way. Sadly, you were bullied as a kid, and there's a new guy that's hired at your company, and it's his first day, and he walks in, and he looks exactly like the bully you knew in grade school. So you immediately dislike this person, right? Mm-hmm. Have an emotional, a visceral reaction. And he's a really nice guy. Yeah, he looks just like Harry, right? So that's a, kind of simplistic explanation of what underlies emotional reaction.
Yeah, that makes sense. You've mentioned it a few times in our conversation about having a spiritual practice and the importance of that. And I was curious if you could elaborate more of what that looks like for you, because I feel like there are lots of options. I think yoga has been a big part of your practice. Or what are some things you do daily to either maintain that connection or to would be disciplined about?
Yeah. Prayer and meditation.
Okay.
I don't really think a practice is a spiritual practice in the absence of either of those. I think it's, kind of required if I was going to, be bossy about it. And, meditation, being comfortable in the quiet, right? In the absence of any sensory stimulation other than how maybe the air feels on your skin or whatever ambient noises are in the background, right? Learning how to be okay with yourself.
With just being.
Yeah. And, each of us is different. I mean, we're kind of all built the same, but we have different expressions of that common build, right? And, for most people to sit eyes closed for a half hour is excruciating.
Yeah,
and
I had to work
think about that for a second. Whoa.
The easy thing is hard.
Yeah. So learning how to keep showing up to something that's difficult, right? There is such wisdom, I think, that gets cultivated by that, right? Because discipline is about, it's different than motivation. Motivation is oh, you're motivated. Discipline is you do it anyway when you're not, right? You just keep showing up. And to me, going back to the cans with the string, prayer is an opportunity for a conversation, right? My prayer is always the same. There's very little diversity in my. I have a specific ritual. Walk down my driveway, come to my yoga center, light Palo Santo, and audibly express my prayer as I walk the perimeter of this beautiful space with the, sacred smoke of the Palo Santo wafting in the air. So that's how I begin my practice. And then once the prayer is complete, I sit. And the physical practice of yoga, right, which is what most Westerners think of as yoga.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the physical practice, because it can be demanding, teaches you a lot about how you're habituated to respond to something hard, right? So for me, what goes on the mat is it's like a little training mat for the things that happen off the mat, right? So something as simple as something's hard off the mat, when it's happening, can you create mindfulness, right? Can you be fully present and consciously breathe,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
That'll serve you,
Yeah.
right? Or if you are challenged by something, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, kind of how are you responding to that? Are you being kind to yourself? Can you observe any of it with the spirit and the energetics of compassion? Right? These are the things we cultivate in yoga practice, right? But, I mean, yoga in Sanskrit means union. It's about
Oneness.
unity with the divine. Asana, the physical practice of yoga, is just one of 8 limbs, right? And some would say it's probably the least important of the 8. Yet in the West, that's the focus.
It is.
Yeah. So, I mean, yoga is definitely my practice, but in a real traditional sense of the practice.
I'm curious, when you meditate, do you use it kind of as a tool passively or actively or whatever suits that day when you get into that oneness with spirit and feel that beingness? Are you asking questions or receiving answers to your prayers, or just being and seeing what comes?
Yeah, the latter. Yeah, and part of it is set in the prayer, right? My prayer is always to be an instrument of the highest good and to live my highest timeline, and for the insights and the resources and the people that I need to support that, right? To embody that, to come forth. So, I mean, there's definitely been some profound moments in meditation where I've been told things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one more recently, a fairly urgent message that I heeded. Yeah. So to me, meditation is just creating that receptivity, but not really directing the receptivity, right? Like not having, don't be outcome oriented, I want this to do this, or here's my question. No,
Not our timeline.
I mean, you can, but I don't think it really serves your highest good. To me, it's more about surrender and receptivity and getting out of the way so that wisdom, can come forth and I can hear it, right? It would be like trying to have a conversation, really important conversation in a loud room, right? Or you're in a bar and you're trying to, have an intimate conversation with somebody. You can't. It's impossible. And I think for many of us, right, there's so much inner noise that it's challenging to hear, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
That's true too.
meditation teaches us, how to create some quiet.
Wonderful. I have one more question. You have a beautiful whole page on your website dedicated to starting small. So suggestions of where people can start. And one of the things you have on there is something, forgive me if I say it wrong, called dowsing. So working with a pendulum. I've never actually done that. I've been on the receiving end of an energy healer who has used a pendulum, but I was curious if you could educate us and tell us more about that.
Yeah, again, think of it as the cans with the string. In that it's a communication tool. So I use the pendulum for 2 purposes: to clear energy, right? So if in my prayer, I'll ask, do my children, any of my loved ones need clearing this morning? And the pendulum behaves in a certain way. So yes is a vertical swing and no is a horizontal swing. So, so I get that information that way. And, it's not as if there's nothing inherent in the pendulum, right? It's just this externalization of the communication, right? And it helps, particularly people that are new at this. It like serves as validation. Maybe you think the answer is yes, but you're not quite sure.
And then you see it, and it's
yeah. So it's like asking your angels and your guardians, right, to be present with you. You always need permission, and you need to ask. Right? They don't tend to get involved without being asked. So you ask them, and then they're present. You validate that they're present, so that you understand that the counsel that you're getting, the information you're getting, is coming from a higher realm, not from you. So, and then when you clear energy, the pendulum swings in a circle.
As you're clearing, or to show it's cleared as you're clearing?
No, as you're clearing.
And you clear by prayer?
Yeah, asking the same peeps, angels, guardians, even ancestors of the highest vibration and intention, my guides and guardian, everybody to come forth. I always call on Yeshua, on Jesus, and Mary Magdalene too. Sometimes they can come, sometimes they're busy doing other things. But anyway, and then once every, is there, ask questions. It's not using the pendulum to try to affect an outcome or manipulate anything, right? It's more of a way of communicating. And my teacher of the pendulum is a wonderful woman named Joan Staffen. She's written many books about the art of dowsing. Highly recommend any and all of her books. And she also has created these elaborate charts that you can use, because the pendulum will actually begin to swing on a part of the chart where information there, so it's like, I don't know, you can kind of think of it like when you're a kid with a Ouija board, sort of. But this is much more sacred and intentional. And Joan's got great books if you want to dig in a little bit more. Yeah, and so again, I think I've had many non-believers, kind of sit with me with the pendulum, right? And so I'll get everybody, all the unseen support there, ask permission of the spirit of the person that, is thinking this is all bunk. And I'll say something as simple as, is this man's name Bob? When his name is Larry or whatever, the pendulum will swing, a big dramatic no, and then I'll say the correct name, and then it swings yes. So just little things like that where people, and they see that my hand isn't moving. Yeah. So I don't know. Dowsing, I think, is a way of confirming all that we've talked about, on this podcast already, but confirming that you're not alone and that you have help and you can create the conditions to have a conversation, receive information.
Amen. Yes. Well, is there anything you would like to add today?
Well, if people are interested in learning more about my journey, I did publish a memoir back in November called Tragic Magic. And the feedback I'm getting from people, it fills my heart, but it also is so aligned with why I wrote it, which was to be of service to my readers and to share my mess and to share a little bit of how I really came to know what I know and embody what I embody. And, there's some real miracles in my story.
Yay. Congratulations on the book.
Oh, thank you. And so I think in reading it and having me share these moments of, divine intervention, that divine, intuition, that literally saved my life.
Wow. Amazing. Well, tell us the best place for people to connect with you and to follow your work.
Oh, sure. So Instagram at Regan Caruthers. That's one place. And then regancaruthers.com. And, one of the things I do, though it's a pretty selective process because I don't want to do it all day long, is I do provide inner life coaching. So for people that really are ready, there's a readiness to working with me, and want to develop a practice that they can stick with and do, the deeper inner alchemy, the healing. So I do inner life coaching. And if people want to just kind of explore that a little bit with me, they can set up a free discovery call on my website. And they describe their goals and I describe how I approach it. And if that person feels resonant and is really committed, then we figure it out.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again. I very much appreciated this conversation.
Well, thanks for having me.
Hey, Sparkles. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Intuitive Wisdom Podcast. If you haven't already, click subscribe and follow. And if you love this episode, please leave a review and share it on Instagram and tag me at Delicious Ease. That's DELICIOUSEASE so that I can say thank you. Every review helps another person find this podcast and learn to welcome their own intuitive wisdom. You can download your free 20-minute guided ideal day meditation on my website, deliciousease.com. Again, that's DELICIOUSEASE.com. And have you bought my book yet? Now available on Amazon. Be sure to find my book, Make Ease Your Vibe, for mindset, energy, and time strategies that help you raise your vibration and enjoy the life you live. See you next week.